Welcome to a very special Virtuosity podcast today. And we thought we'd do something kind of fun. As some of you may know, we've been working on our John Coltrane audio biography, an 8-part series where we go through the whole history of Coltrane's music and really show how he developed into one of the great virtuosos of the 20th century. Timo, you and I were talking about how we part of the motto is virtuosity without hierarchy.
Yeah.
And so that means that we have to discuss the virtuosity of slow playing and slow music as well as fast, technically advanced music.
Well, think about it. Yeah, I mean, think about like the absolute death tempos of Ray Charles. That's so virtuoso. Nobody can do that but him. He's like the only dude who can do that. He fires the drummer every night because drummers can't do it. So there's virtuosity from many different angles, right? You could be a virtuoso lyricist, Sondheim or John Lennon or Bob Marley or something. There's a virtuosity in unexpected ways. It doesn't always mean fleet fingers going all over the fretboard, right?
Right. And I think we both have a tendency to look to those artists who've pushed the envelope of their instrument to new, techniques and innovations, or have taken the harmonic advancements of their different genres, and
sure,
and that's all worthy and wonderful stuff. But we occasionally have to slow down.
That's the low hanging fruit. Yeah, the low hanging fruit there, right?
Yeah, so we got to occasionally slow down and recognize, yes, the virtuosity in playing slowly. Like you said, slow tempos, incredibly challenging for musicians to work and get the feel of those correctly. I'd also add in that a lot of times with a slower tempo, musicians can focus on tone, to a degree that they can't when they're ripping arpeggios at a million miles an hour. Now we're slowing down, and each note takes on its own character, and there's space and room for that note to breathe and to be full and rich.
Yeah, storytelling, instrumental storytelling, like as an acoustic bass player, a lot of times like playing fast or upper register fast stuff, it's not really moving. I'm not sure what any of it means, but when you play a low solo that has these sort of meaningful, low, deep tones that talk to you, it's like the old man by the fireplace is going to give you a wise tale. It's great.
Right. So this is going to be John Coltrane Plays Ballads. And one of the things as we were going through his canon of music, it's so interesting that this guy that was pushing the envelope of all that technique and working at warp speed, with his brilliant mind, he throughout his career was very devoted to playing ballads, and we're going to find that with a lot of the great musicians that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah. He has a couple of really great innovations that he brings to the ballad language. The ballad thing, especially for tenor saxophone, it's a part of it. It's like a rite of passage. You have to be able to play ballads really well on the tenor saxophone. Like when Bird plays ballads, he's so great. It's Bird. Bird's the greatest of all time. But he right away launches off into highly accurate 30-second notes in his vocabulary. So that all you're doing is changing what the drums are doing, because Bird's kind of playing the same thing. When Train plays a ballad, he's taking his cues a little bit more from the tenor ballad tradition of that Ben Webster, Coleman Hawkins, Lester Young, Don Baez, and Dexter Gordon's killer at the ballads. And so Train is offering a new voice to the tenor ballad thing, and he's got that spiritual reserve. There's something mighty deep about Miles. There's something mighty deep about Bird, and there really is something magically deep about the spiritual reservoir that exists inside Train, and it connects with people. People, they might be in awe of Giant Steps or confused by it. They're always confused by his late works because it sounds like such alien music to some people. But the ballad, man, that when you put on a Coltrane search on any of those search engines, it's ballads, ballads, ballads. They play Duke and Train, and they play Train playing ballads because People love it. It connects all over the world. What do you got? Like 30 million views for any of those ballads? And typically ballads are kind of boring. But it captures, I guess, a inner romance and a deeper connection that all humans have to something. Like a romantic movie that'll hit anybody. Even a cruel man can get behind a romantic movie every once in a while.
Yeah, and I think also for us, it's it's that thing of you come home from work, you've had a stressful day, you finally put the kids to bed, and you want a little glass of wine, and you don't necessarily want to put on free jazz and jazz up. Maybe you do. Some nights you do.
Right. Well, you leave that to us specialists. Yeah. Yes, of course.
But some people want to
I hear you.
Want something mellow. But they don't want something cheesy. They want something, like you said, that's real and is a great musician. And so they'll put on, the classic Miles albums, and they'll put on classic Coltrane, and so that's what we're doing today. And for also, this is first going to be released as an exclusive episode for our Patreon followers. And so to them, they're going to be getting our recording here without the songs, because our songs are licensed through Spotify. And so if you're a Patreon listener, what you're going to do is you're going to listen to this episode, and then you're going to go to our playlist, our matching playlist on Spotify or YouTube to hear the songs. So they're not integrated like when you're listening to our regular Spotify's. It will be later when we release it to the public on Spotify and a few months afterward. But for the Patreon subscribers, they're going to get this episode. And so go to the playlists, and this one's going to be, John Coltrane Plays Ballads, Part 1 and Part 2. And this is Part 1. Now, in addition to the download of the episode that will be available to Patreon subscribers, you will also have access to the YouTube link, a private link, exclusively for Patreon subscribers, that will have the full episodes and the tunes. So you can go there to listen to the full thing. But if you want to listen to the episodes, you can access either the YouTube playlist or the Spotify playlist. So we're going to get into the songs now, and we're really focusing on a period from 1957 to 59. All these cuts on, and we have got a couple of cuts that are all from the same album. And so we were discussing earlier about how did we choose these songs, and some of them are because we don't have them in the audio biography. We wanted to add something, an additional but works that are really important, and also works that are available on Spotify. So there were some editing choices we had to make with some of that criteria.
And then, of course, when I went through my transcriptions of Train, and you said pick out the ballads, well, of course, all of a sudden I had 40 of them, and that's a lot. It's a lot of ballads. Yeah. And so you have to whittle the list down with different criteria, so not doing more than 2 songs from a particular album, making sure that Train is playing not just 8 bars or 16 bars, but really kind of carrying the whole thing. And like when he plays on a Red Garland record, sometimes Red will play the melody and solo for a long time, and Train just takes like a solo or a 16-bar solo on it. So didn't want to include that. So various criteria. I wanted to sometimes include, which I love to do, like he plays Lush Life in 57, early 58, I think, and they kind of don't do the chord changes totally correctly for Billy Strayhorn's original version, which is shocking because they rarely make mistakes like that. And then you can listen to Train play it at the end of his life, where it's just the piece is transformed, and I love that contrast because it shows you so clearly how fast he developed as a player, as an artist,
Right.
But sometimes those things aren't on Spotify. They're in my bootleg collection. Haha.
Yeah. Well, let's get to the first song, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the songs, and because also there's a whole thing about the melodies. Because correct me if I'm wrong here, team, but not one of these that we hear today is an original by John Coltrane. They're all covers of music. No. Either he's playing on a Thelonious Monk tune with Thelonious Monk, or it's popular tunes of the day, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit.
Well, that was the criteria that I chose. It's him playing standards, and sometimes the gigantic standards like Stardust or Invitation or something like that. And some of the criteria that goes into that is that it's like a tenor thing where like lots of other tenor players had played it, or it's like a classic. Somebody did a classic on it, so Train's tipping his hat at that classic. And sometimes they're doing something that might have had like a black person portrayed in Hollywood early on and not negatively. So that might have had like a hit song in it, and the brothers would focus on that element of what was in the musical or in the Broadway show, and that song would come into their consciousness through that light, you know.
Right. Okay, so the first cut we've got is a song called Violets for Your Furs. And it's a 1957 recording on the Prestige label. And the song itself is from 1941. And it's the title is supposedly based on Lana Turner, the famous pinup model and femme fatale of movies like Postman Always Rings Twice. And she supposedly wore flowers pinned to her fur coats all the time. So
Wasn't she the big pinup for GIs in World War II?
yes,
at the end
yeah,
there?
Lana Turner, yeah, sex symbol,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and so when we go through these tunes, we're going to hear a lot of when we talk about other people that recorded the song or the people who made it famous or where did it come from. A lot of the same names come up over and over again, and so the original recording is Tommy Dorsey with Frank Sinatra, a name we're going to hear a lot, if not on almost every single one of these tunes.
Well, a lot of these standards come from the golden era of all that stuff, you know.
Yeah, and so some of the people that recorded the song, vocalists Shirley Horn, Billie Holiday, and even Barry Manilow, and then jazz covers include people like Chet Baker, Nat Adderley, Dave Brubeck, Johnny Hartman. So we're going to hear Coltrane's version of "Violets for Your Furs."